Hybrid warfare is upon us because Russian Shahed attack drones just penetrated deep into Polish territory, forcing NATO to scramble fighter jets in an attempt to shoot them down.
It's getting rough. We are entering unprecedented waters. Things are getting very scary. Meanwhile, here in the U.S., we're dealing with obviously a lot of internal conflicts that are going on, which is actually, if I'm Russia, a pretty perfect time to strike while the U.S. is politically in a very unstable place.
What all this means, to put it into perspective, is this is the first time in history that NATO forces have directly engaged the Russian military, raising fears that the war could spill over. So
it just keeps escalating, and every time it seems like, well, maybe this is going to finally start to, wrap up. Maybe we'll finally end this. It doesn't. And then we enter into, like I just said, unprecedented territories. Now we have NATO forces beginning to engage with Russian forces at the very same time. I don't know if they want that battle, though. I really don't. I don't know what they're doing. This is probably just a game because I think Russia knows. Well, let's get into it, actually.
So is it finally time to sound the alarmist alarm, or is this all just one great big misunderstanding, guys?
It doesn't matter if it's a misunderstanding because it will just continue to... Like, how many more misunderstandings will we see? How many more misunderstandings will continue to escalate the matter until it goes to a point where it just goes too far, essentially.
Prime Minister said, "This situation brings us closest we have ever been to open conflict since World War II, and that they're facing an enemy that doesn't hide its hostile intentions."
Unfortunately, I feel like that statement is dropped so often that it means little nowadays. And that's what happens to so much of just words now in the internet age. People just say things, and so much of our language doesn't mean anything anymore. But he's not wrong. Like, it's still true that even the minor escalations that we've continued to see between Russia and Ukraine and then Russia and NATO, it continues to push the bar forward and forward. Like, it's like the stock market going up every single day. Like, okay, the stock market being up at all-time highs, that's kind of what it's supposed to do. You're kind of supposed to constantly see the stock market, if it's working in theory anyways, it's supposed to constantly be at all-time highs. That's the way a whole thing kind of works. So the statement is true, that it just continues to get closer and closer to World War II for Europe.
Meanwhile, the Russian Defense Ministry hid their hostile intentions by denying any involvement, saying, quote, "No targets on the territory of Poland were planned for destruction." Today, I want to know, what's the evidence for whether or not this was really a deliberate drone attack? What was the Russian military's objectives here? How effective was NATO's response really? I'm your average infantryman, Chris Cappy. Let's find out.
If anyone's ready for this, though, it's going to be Poland. Poland is right there. They know the position they're in with all the historical context to Polish history as well. They are not going to let the same thing happen to them that's happened to them for 1,000 years now. So Poland is ready. Now, I don't know if some of the other NATO members are quite as ready. Those countries like Poland, like Finland, like the Baltic region, they're a lot more amped up. People further away from the conflict, like I'm thinking like Spain, they're probably just like, meh, but I hope Spain really starts putting more emphasis on whether it be spending or just taking the matter. I know they're pretty far away from Poland, kind of, but all things considered, not really.
What happened is 19 Russian drones entered Polish airspace from 11:30 p.m. on Tuesday night until 6:30 a.m. Wednesday, September 10th. Violating airspace is considered a big party foul in this region, so NATO scrambled assets from multiple different countries, including Polish F-16 fighters, Dutch F-35 stealth fighters, and German Patriot air defense batteries to intercept these drones.
It's almost like they're just testing it out. They're just testing the water. Russia's just like, let's just accidentally fly these drones in and see if NATO's even ready for this. You know what I mean? Let's just see what their response is, and we'll make sure to log their response and see what it feels like they're feeling out. These are like recon missions to gather intel. Like, that's a little bit concerning. Like I said earlier, man, if you're like a country that's in NATO that's not really thinking this is that big of a deal, you probably should start thinking that this is a pretty big deal, if I'm going to be honest.
These different countries' weaponry was coordinated with an Italian airborne warning surveillance aircraft, which identified the location of these enemy targets. fed it to the fighter jets real time.
Look at that.
Who
Look
then
at
shot
that
down
European unity right there. Italians, Polish, Netherlands. Look at that's just amazing to see all these. And then supported with German military equipment
on at least
on the
4
ground.
of them. What we know is Russia launched over 400 attack drones and some 40 missiles into western Ukraine on that night. And the reason NATO...
Keep in mind the context of like what's happening behind this. I'm also hearing so much news about how the Ukrainians are also flying drones way deep into Russia as well and going after like energy centers, going after oil production factories and things like that, hitting a key infrastructure deep into Russia. Is Russia now considering doing the very same thing? Are they trying to match up with that?
Officials think this isn't true, that it's just an accident, is because of how many and how deep they penetrated into Polish territory.
That is crazy because they went so far. Obviously, if you're looking on a map this zoomed out, it doesn't look that far. It looks like it's like an inch on the map. This is miles and miles away. They should have turned way further back.
The live conflict map behind me, it's never a good day when I say that. The map shows us the marked geolocations where Russian drone pieces were recovered. Where were these drones headed? The answer to that is being used as the single biggest piece of evidence that this was an intentional Russian drone incursion, because one senior military official said that these drones had the flight path on their way towards the city of Rzeszów inside of Poland. Rzeszów is in eastern Poland, less than 100 kilometers from Ukraine's border.
Oh my God, this is scary. This is really scary. I mean, because it's not like they sent in like 1, 2, maybe 3 drones, way more than that, and they went way deeper inside of Poland in the first place. Like I really hope that NATO is ready. Also, is it a coincidence at all that Russia is possibly playing with a potential attack on a NATO member while the winter is coming up? Now, maybe I'm reaching a little bit here, but it is a little bit interesting to see these attacks take place in what most of the world thinks it's fall. I think America doesn't classify this as fall until like another week. But could Russia be thinking about escalating matters while their environmental defenses are up, you know, like with the winter coming up, with the winter approaching? I got to assume that's going to be somewhat on their mind. I mean, definitely the winter affects the battle lines just between Russia and Ukraine.
Just so happens to be a key logistics hub for NATO weapons being sent into Ukraine. In fact, 80% of all foreign aid and weaponry transits through Poland.
It has to. I mean, it makes the most sense geographically. Like, it's going to be harder to send it through the Baltics. You have to just go straight from Poland. I mean, obviously Poland has a direct connection to Germany, and Germany has a direct connection to France, and those are the strongest members on continental Europe, I would say.
Are warehouses here to store the munitions? Could it be a coincidence that these drones were headed there? Who knows? Only the military gods, right? Russia
allowing 1st Armored Combat Brigade, 3rd Infantry Division to join V Corps to assure NATO allies and further deter Russian aggression.
Ahead drones could destroy these shipments when they're at their most vulnerable, all tied up and locked down in the shipment. Robert?
Yeah, could this be a potential like Pearl Harbor sort of thing? Like, is Russia considering just doing a mass blast to this very key choke point where NATO is sending all of their artifacts, all their military equipment into the Ukrainian front? Can they just blast that, affect military equipment, affect all that stuff, all the support that's coming through? You hit that right there, boom, Ukraine is momentarily extremely vulnerable, and then they send in a big wave of attack over there in eastern Ukraine.
Kagan, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institute, said, quote, "The only surprising thing about the attack on Poland is that it didn't happen sooner. Since before World War I, it was understood that if one nation's government provided weapons and war material directly to another nation at war with a third nation, that legally made the donor a belligerent in the war and therefore subject to attack. When intercepting drones, these aircraft have to stay on station for hours at a time, so Polish citizens uploaded footage throughout the night, hearing different NATO fighter aircraft circling overhead. In fact, Polish authorities had to send out an alert to some 9 million residents in the eastern part of the country.
Now, we're talking Russia, but do not forget their ally directly borders. Well, see, this map behind him is showing Poland and Ukraine, and like a key kind of choke point, a key hub for support for Ukraine. But remember, Belarus, very clearly, Lukashenko, very clearly allied to Putin, is a Russian vassal state. I mean, I don't know if we can call it a vassal, but basically, the Belarus is 100% aligned to Russia. Then you have Russian Kaliningrad up here, which is direct Russian territory. It's an enclave. It's not connected to the majority of Russian land, but that is also a key component.
Telling them to shelter in place.
So Poland is in a vulnerable position, and if NATO was looking weak, I really hope this is a big wake-up call for all NATO members, because things are clearly escalating
during the attack. But it's not just about the cost of weapons, really. You gotta consider the cost of scrambling jets. It's enormous. Take a look at these numbers that are publicly released by the Pentagon for the costs. It's millions of dollars each time these jets have to be on station overnight.
Oh, have you seen, I've seen videos of people showing, I don't know if they're, it's like anti-air rockets being blasted into space, and it's showing literally the millions of dollars that are being spent essentially every time a rocket is thrown. And it's just like, doo, 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 and it'll just show like a little cost symbol in US dollars every time you see a rocket get launched. And they're so expensive. It's actually insane. Now, I'm not sure if those numbers are just considering the rocket. I'm sure it's talking about the transportation of those rockets, the transportation, like how they got there, all the research that was needed for, getting that technology in there. It's probably a little bit inflated slightly, but it's generally adding up the entire cost.
Not to mention the maintenance, wear and tear on all the airframes.
Yeah, oh, there you go too. Yeah, when it comes to maintenance and wear and tear and the mechanics you got to pay and all that stuff.
Usually air-to-air missiles from fighter jets cost millions of dollars. The military powers of NATO would not be able to routinely use F-35s to intercept these cheap drones each and every night. I remember when I was younger and totally broke, I took my wife out on our first date night, spent a bunch of money, but after that we started dating regularly and I realized I couldn't sustain that.
Bro, the average male experience. That is, yeah, I've been through that way too many times. It's fun at first, and then all of a sudden, you're looking at your wallet and it's like, oh my God, I cannot live my life like this forever.
What I'm saying is using F-35s is a steak dinner. You can't do it every night. But very recently, NATO allies have developed a new capability exactly meant for this kind of occasion. They likely launched their new Advanced Precision Kill Weapon System. These are relatively cheap. They're like $15,000 rockets that destroy attack drones at a fraction of the cost of other air-to-air missiles. So the F-15, for instance, is capable of carrying 42 of these 70 mil rockets to hit multiple drones, far more than the 8 regular air-to-air missiles that you might see on there. Those drones only cost about $40,000 for Russia to produce, and they're capable of carrying a hefty payload of 40 kilograms, 90 pounds, which is basically around the explosive punch of an artillery shell. It can level a building.
Well, I mean, isn't Ukraine, I'm not sure what his point is here, but Ukraine is able to do those little mini drones for $1,000 a day, something like that, maybe less than 1,000. Like those little drones that they're saying that do little mini explosions into Russian tanks and completely immobilize them. They do not cost that much money at all.
4 out of 9 drones intercepted doesn't sound like an outstanding interception rate, but this is for a number of reasons.
This is such an interesting breakdown. We're not talking how effective the NATO flights are, but the fact that NATO will go broke if they continue to. We need drones, apparently. NATO needs to probably update their entire military infrastructure to get more in line with what Ukraine is seeing, for instance, on the front lines.
Shooting anything down midair with a multi-million-dollar munition from a warplane can cause tremendous risk to the people underneath. It's a real hazard.
Especially, like he mentioned, those drones only being, 40,000? Is that what he said? That's crazy.
No one wants fragments from these landing on their Volkswagen. It can be more safe to let the drone crash, especially if it's unclear if it's armed, has a payload or not, and it sounds like these drones were unarmed, and we'll get more into that in a second. So Polish officials said that only the drones that posed a real threat were ones that were chosen to be shot down. Military analysts all across the board, though, are pretty unanimously warning that NATO's response has exposed a weakness to Russia when it comes to this type of warfare.
Absolutely. I mean, and honestly, whether Russia did send it in intentionally or not, NATO needs to take this super seriously because clearly I don't think they're exactly right. I think that's the whole point here, is it doesn't seem like NATO would be fully ready for a certain type of war, not a war that is literally like threat level 1, not a war that's like literally boots on the ground, but a much more sort of, what do they call that? More playful war, more drone warfare, just like little bits and pieces here, not a full-on aggressive, like, you know, an entire division like marching on through, essentially.
NATO does not currently seem to have the cost-effective mobile and defense teams with 50 cal machine gun trucks.
NATO is probably ready for that scenario, boots on the ground, but doesn't sound like they're ready for this new age sort of robotics and drones and things like that, where it's very cheap. It's now incredibly cheap. I mean, Ukraine is able to defend themselves, well, at least defend or blow up tanks or blow up Russian infrastructure for very cheap with all the drones that they've got producing and things like that.
They don't deploy helicopters or UAV interceptor teams for this kind of purpose. The best option currently that they seem to have is expensive stealth fighter jets. Conrad, the director of Roshan.
And remember, every time people talk about war, one of the biggest things they forget is the most important things to war is logistics. That is the most important aspect to conflict in the modern day, is purely logistics.
Consulting is a defense analyst that's an expert on Russia and Belarus. His analysis was that claims that some drones were deliberately allowed through because they pose no threat should be regarded as a dangerous illusion. Evidence that the drone attack caught authorities by surprise is the fact that some of the wreckage was found as far as 550 kilometers or 340 miles.
It probably should not have gone anywhere close that far into Poland, I will say. Like, the NATO forces that were ready and engaged these drones, like, we probably should have blown them up way closer, like as immediately once they entered Polish airspace.
Deep into Polish territory. This suggests that many of these...
Yeah, this is actually the one that's more important. This is way too deep. At least this, I mean, I don't know where this came from. The animation was showing it was coming from Belarus, but this at least is right next to Kaliningrad, you know, straight up Russian territory like we talked about. This one right here, that's way too deep. You're literally the capital of Poland, Warsaw. It should get nowhere near Warsaw.
Drones could have been intercepted much sooner, so extensive safety precautions were obviously taken. Poland went as far as to shut down major airports, including Warsaw. What is Russia's goal here? It would be to influence public opinion to...
It's so unfortunate. I really wanted to go to Poland, like, probably next year, but maybe I still will, but it's like, man... Are people starting to reconsider this a little bit at this point? I mean, because that's always been a concern for a while now. Like, Poland's right there on the front lines. If shit was going to go down, do you want to be in Poland? Probably not. That's probably one of the worst places you could go right now if things are really to hit the fan. That's unfortunate because you got to root for Poland here. You got to root for Poland, but damn.
Not support the war in Ukraine. Poland has sent some $4 billion to support it so far. It'd be an attempt to deter Poland from increasing support for Ukraine. Robert Kagan said, quote, aiding Ukraine has already begun to be a controversial subject in Poland. The prospect of Russian attacks and retaliation could drive up opposition, especially if the United States proves unreliable, end quote. It can also be aimed at...
That is the big question, if the U.S. is going to be unreliable. I feel like, personally, I mean, maybe it's easy for me to say as an American, but I think that we would be very reliable still in this situation. I know that's a huge question mark, and honestly, that's perfectly understandable why Europeans are questioning U.S. loyalty in NATO and things like that. I think more than likely the U.S. would definitely still 100% aid NATO, but European leaders starting to question it, European leaders trying to plan for a possibility that the U.S. wouldn't aid them in a potential conflict with Russia is probably the safe thing to do. You need to have a backup plan. You got to have a backup plan. You can't be 100% reliant on the U.S. for sure coming over.
Creating what is essentially drama between the NATO ally, because it could force there to be disagreements over the best way to respond. That causes stress, because already the incursions have caused a wide variety of opinions on how serious the response should be. It's ranged from U.S. Congressman Joe Wilson saying
Russia is attacking NATO ally Poland with Iranian Shahid drones less than a week after President Trump hosted President Naraki at the White House.
quote,
okay.
"This is an act of war." And meanwhile, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom had some more tame words, saying, quote, "It's extremely reckless move, which only serves to remind us of President Putin's blatant disregard for peace." The U.S. response so far has been less alarm compared to the NATO members, with the president saying, quote,
Well, I mean, is that, again, it's the distance to the conflict overall that's happening here. Of course, the U.S. and Canada are going to be like, and I mentioned Spain earlier, but U.S. and Canada, of course, are going to be like, nah, not a big deal. Meanwhile, Poland, I can understand why Poland's like, yo, this is kind of a big deal, y'all. You better get it together.
quote, "It could have been a mistake," end quote. It's important to note that there's some 10,000 U.S. troops stationed in Poland who are
And I
at
think we have like 30 to 50,000 stationed in Germany.
risk to these type of attacks. Some of the evidence that suggests this was not simply a misunderstanding is the fact that the majority of these drones came in from Belarus. They appear to have come from the increased presence of Russian forces happen to already be in Belarus right now, because this all happens to coincide with the large-scale Zapad 25 military exercises.
Yeah, Belarus is definitely a vassal state at this point. They're essentially a vassal state.
This, of course, wouldn't be the first time that Russian troops had used military training drills as a cover for an attack. However, it's also true that Russian drones crash landing all over the region is not that unusual.
If this was an accident, Russia is so lucky it didn't cause a single casualty. That is how things will escalate further. If this were to happen again and a Polish civilian is hurt, or is killed, or even worse, imagine like an American soldier like he was talking about stationed in Poland, that's going to ramp things up so fast.
Russian drones have even crossed into Poland as early as last week.
Yeah, they have done this happened like a year ago too, I think. Didn't Russia shoot down a drone? Or maybe 2 years ago. I remember hearing about this. It's not the very first time, but this is the most egregious.
The past year, there's been multiple reports of a single drone or two landing in Romania, Moldova, or the Baltic states. I see these kind of reports are up all the time. Lithuania has caught Russian drones crashing on their territory, which also prompted scrambling of NATO jets just earlier this year. You might recall earlier in the invasion of Ukraine back in November of 2022, a missile landed in Poland, killing 2 people near the border.
Oh, man.
Originally, it was believed to be a Russian missile, but a full investigation by Polish authorities later revealed that it was an air defense missile that had misfired from Ukraine. So,
Rough.
armed Russian attack drones have landed inside of Latvia. There are dozens.
I mean, that's here. We're focused on Poland, and Poland is a very big country, but man, for the Baltics, I'd be extremely concerned for the Baltics. If I was in a Baltic country, or just, yeah, I feel like the most vulnerable NATO members would be Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania. Those are some tough ones. Poland, we can get over there and get over there pretty quick. But yeah, the 3 Baltic bros, and they know all about Russian aggression and things like that. So do the Poles, to be fair, also. But
Literally.
NATO aerospace breached. Latvia confirms first crash of a Russian drone in its territory.
Doesn't.
Is this just because they're stupid? You know what I'm saying? Are the Russian drones just like, they just lose it? I don't know. I'm just trying to think, like, are they just malfunctioning? Are they producing so much that, of course, there's going to be 1 or 2 that are malfunctioning. They go way too far out in space, and the Russians can't get it to come back, and they're just like, oh, whatever, screw it.
Of these reports,
they don't really care that much. I mean, that's the thing. They should care, because this is really ramping up tensions.
Few years. In these instances, each country kind of did a hand wave and said, yeah, you know what? Mistakes happen, and they didn't use it as a reason to have a full-on freak out over it. So why is it different this time? What's different now than all those other occasions? A security official from Belarus said it was because the drones had been jammed that they went into Poland in the first place. Russia's senior diplomat in Poland, named Ordash, said, quote, we consider the accusations groundless. No evidence that these drones are of Russian origin has been presented. I guess implying that these are Ukrainian drones. Russia's absolutely not interested in an escalation with Poland, he goes on to say. But unfortunately,
I will say, I mean, unless they have something that they're planning that we're not foreseeing, but Russia does not want full-on escalation with NATO. They know they lose that. They know the entire world knows that Russia loses that. Maybe they're trying to do some minor things. I don't know. They just definitely do not want full-blown war with NATO. They could do small skirmishes. There could be some small guerrilla tactics. There could be some smaller ordeals. But full-on war with NATO, I think Russia is fully aware that they definitely lose that 99 out of 100 times without nukes, of course.
Fortunately, there is no reason to expect that the Polish authorities,
but they do have nukes. So that is a factor you got to think about.
In their anti-Russian frenzy, will listen to us either. U.S. General Alexis.
I think that Russia is very concerned about a possible conflict directly with NATO. I don't even want to say very. I think they're extremely concerned about that possibility because they know that's it. That's probably going to be it for them. I mean, you're talking about Russia with the economy of Spain, just Spain, with a country that has 140 million people. I think it might be less now because they've lost so many men in Ukraine, versus Europe, who has over 500 million people. The entire European EU economy is like the third strongest in the world. Then that's not even including all of the U.S. You also have to throw Canada in there. They do not want they don't want a direct fight with NATO. Things, like I said, though, I don't know if they want something minor with NATO, though. That's the thing.
Who's NATO's supreme allied commander in Europe, said, "We do not yet know if this was an intentional act or an unintentional act. It's possible that Ukrainian countermeasures could divert attack drones. It's true. I remember when I was reporting from the inside of Ukraine, the front line, my phone would get spoofed and my phone would suddenly show my location on a map, on Google Maps, for instance, as somewhere 300 miles to the east or west. Sometimes my phone GPS would say that I was in Poland. Sometimes it would say I was in Russia. The point is, when you spoof a drone, it could send it far off course, making the drone think that it was somewhere else altogether. Jamming can send drones many miles off course because they navigate using these automated systems. Ivan isn't sitting behind a computer flying each and every 400 of these drones for 16 hours straight to reach their targets. That's all automated using satellites. But Poland and many other nations are saying that this was deliberate because the way Russian drones react to electronic warfare is supposedly one of two ways. They either fly straight back towards the point of origin, or the second way is that they go off course and crash, but what they don't do is they don't fly on a deliberate path to key military targets in Poland randomly. Because one of the drones even landed at a military base, according to initial reports. It's not surprising at all that Russia would deny their involvement, right? That's kind of par of the course. We would expect that.
Of course.
What is surprising, I think, to me, is how NATO didn't downplay it this time as just an accident like all the other times in the past. It's like that friend that you keep making an excuse for, and you're like, no, he's cool like all the time. I swear, he's never like this. Calling it out as a Russian deliberate attack publicly risks further escalation, which to me, that's something to note. But here's the thing, guys.
This was all over the media. This made a huge media circuit. I think that is definitely justified, and I think it should have. I mean, this was a lot of drones. Just as we're supposed to be trying to find some sort of peace deal here, I think that also amplified the news reports because, I mean, how long is this going to go for? I thought we were getting closer to a peace deal.
Russia's launched many similar sized attacks over the past few months, and this never happened before those times. We also know that Russian intelligence agencies like the FSB, GUR, have been confirmed to be running covert actions inside Poland since 2023. Russia's recruiting...
With that whole thing said, with the whole peace deal potentially be on the horizon, you have to remember that there are forces in both Russia and NATO, and even Ukraine, that they're both forces or powerful members on each side that want to continue the war. That's just a fact of reality. There's always going to be people that profit from war and that want to continue the war, whether that be in Russia or in NATO or in Ukraine. There's lots of profit from that. So that's something to keep in mind as peace talks, as we hear more and more about peace talks, maybe at the very same time, if it feels like the war is escalating at the same time, that kind of shows that there could be two sides in Russia trying to figure out exactly what they want to do. I mean,
people in Poland that are desperate for money and task them with scouting seaports, hiding tracking devices and military cargo, and even plotting to derail trains that are carrying weapons to Ukraine. Russian sabotage campaigns have been linked to warehouses fires all the way in Britain, an attack against a dam in Norway, and multiple cables cut under the Baltic Sea. It doesn't take a military genius mastermind to recognize that a drone attack on Rzeszów would be a major goal, or even forcing more security in this region slows down shipments of this military aid and makes them move under the cover of night only. I was surprised.
It's especially, I was just talking about demographics and sizes and economies, but one big key factor that I left out there is China. China would certainly want to aid Russia in something like this, and that kind of throws all that stuff out the window.
They recently learned that Russia's been flying surveillance drones over logistics routes that the United States uses to ship this military aid through eastern Germany. So Russia's operating drones already in Germany, way further west than Poland. They're collecting intelligence with these drones that may be used for future sabotage efforts. It also gives them advance notice of when different types of weapon systems are arriving at the front line in Ukraine.
Isn't that what China does also to the U.S.? Was that what the whole balloon thing was about? They were observing nuclear sites and things like that?
The thing is, this is exactly the kind of plausible deniable operation that characterizes gray zone hybrid warfare operations. Because right now it's difficult to prove one way or the other really. This can be done incrementally, each time testing the limits without outright triggering a case of full-blown war. I mean, it's a tough call. Do we respond with missiles or strongly worded letters? That's the big strategic dilemma.
Well, they got to show the guy from the Netherlands right there. Is he a big advocate for that?
Of hybrid warfare. Personally, I don't think that's actually what really happened here, because in the past, when these kind of drones would crash in other nations, sometimes they often would be armed, which is how they normally would be, and that would suggest that it was an accident. But since they're all unarmed in this case, it seems like so far this appears to have been a dry run test of the NATO alliance.
That's a good point.
To see how the members respond to being poked and prodded like this.
That's a very good point, because then they have, plausible deniability, I guess. Or like if they're unarmed, it's like, bro, relax. They're unarmed. Chill. We weren't doing anything crazy. That's a very good point. And if the other drones that have crash landed were armed, it's like, okay, why was that the difference? Why is this dude the only one that's wearing, like, what are these, some Nikes Air Force Ones? What are these shoes?
I, of course, can't be 100% certain. That's the whole point in hybrid warfare, though. It leaves that little bit of room for doubt. That voice in the back of your head that always tells you, you're making a mistake, you're wrong. That's the voice that makes taking any kind of decisive
It feels like China does that same thing with Taiwan as well as things escalate. They're like, they turn on you, they gaslight you, be like, oh, bro, you're just paranoid. We're not getting ready to, invade Taiwan. No, bro. Chill, bro. We're just moving these boats. We're just surrounding these boats. We're just engaging with Filipino boats in the South China Sea. Chill out, bro. Chill. We're not trying anything too crazy.
Fight action in hybrid warfare so difficult. All of this comes just 1 month after the US generals released plans for the NATO Eastern Flank Defense Plan, which is designed to prevent this kind of hybrid war attack from ever happening. On the diplomatic level, the drone incursion caused Poland's government to invoke Article 4 of the NATO treaty. What's Article
Parties will consult together whenever, in the opinion of any of them, with the territorial integrity, political independence, or security of any of the parties is threatened.
4? I love bureaucracy as much as the next person, and this is, my friends, a bureaucratic mechanism. It doesn't force members to take any action, but it could pave the way for a joint response.
Remember, Article 5 is what you need to trigger, one attack on one member is an attack on the entire net. Oh, it's right up here. An invocation of Article 5 is often assumed to have military implications, but the NATO treaty says only that its members will assist the party that has been attacked. This can also mean economic or political action.
This has been invoked 8 times only since the alliance was founded.
Only 8 times.
So it's kind of Article 5 light. What this raises is a bunch of uncomfortable questions now about how to respond to what are being called below the threshold attacks. Below the threshold means anything short of launching a missile at a country and saying, yeah, I did it, what are you going to do about it? If you're interested in learning about missiles in warfare and how the line between drones and missiles is being blurred, check out the video here that we recently made on it.
Yeah, it definitely, like I said in the very beginning, clearly things are amping up, and this is not the place you want it to be. But maybe this is always how it was supposed to go with the talks of peace and the talks of a potential ceasefire. Things were also going to ramp up at the very same time because, like I said, there's forces on both sides that don't necessarily want this war to stop. Glad to hear about development of cost-effective countermeasures. Exactly what is needed, bro. With the inflation and in this economy, we can't be flying them F-35s. We can't be paying $1 million a second just to shoot down $40,000 drones or whatever. You stop drones by destroying production facilities. Ooh, that is a good comment right there. Nobody in their right mind believes that this was any kind of accident. I saw one analyst suggest that this might be a means for Russia to prevent allies from sending weaponry to Ukraine and instead keep it at home for their own defenses. That is a smart one. Russia starts making NATO paranoid that they're going to do some sort of attack, and maybe NATO members decide to keep more of the military equipment for themselves. A, this was a test. B, what you called a hybrid war, where you always have a bit of doubt, or below the threshold attacks, is called liminal warfare. Interesting. Yeah, lots of different debates going on down here. It does feel like overall people are highly critical, and they think that Russia more than likely did this on purpose. Notice that Russians are not denying they launched the drones, just that destruction was not intended, not an accident. It is getting really spicy. This is concerning. Why do I feel like I'm going to have to make another video very soon about this in order to address another Russian incursion into NATO? It's getting very concerning. So please go subscribe to Cappy Army and subscribe here as well for my take. I've been following and kind of deeply covering the Russian invasion since the very beginning. Technically, before the very beginning. Technically, months beforehand. So it's weird that I'm getting so old, and here we are. We are still talking about this, and it's still ramping up. Big thanks to my patrons this month. If you want your name here, check that Patreon link in the description down below. Never change Drew unless you want to. We need a Drew bobblehead figurine. Petition for Drew Alexander to make Hoy for ASMR Connor Tingles Pavlik. Version 2. Frederick Tiblin. King Bear Hayes. Lord Luxembourg Lover. Miglu the Goat. Nolan. Nord Tyrol. Tamron. And William.